Hello everyone and welcome to another video. So today's video is going to be my wrap up for the month of September. In the month of September, I actually read a total of 9 books, which is really amazing for me, as I think my highest month that I've read was in January, where I read 10 books, and in the month of September, I read a total of 9 months. It is the same amount that I read in August, which is fairly good. I'm going to go over all the books that I read when I talk about their compile rating scores, so you're just going to get stats right now. So in the month of September, I read a total of 3,341 pages, which is about my average. I read from a total of 3 different genres. I read 4 books that would be classified as fantasy, 7 books with hints of romance, and 5 books with hints of contemporary genre. I read from a total of 3 different classes. I read 1 middle grade book, 5 YA books, and 3 adult books. And during the month of September, I did participate loosely in Becca's Bookoplathon. I did participate in it towards the more so half beginning of the month. And then during the last couple weeks in September, I kind of fell off the, not bandwagon, so to speak, but I just really wasn't, my reading wasn't where I thought it was. I was getting really stressed out in terms of my reading. I don't particularly like readathons where they're more based off of a game. If I do, I will definitely participate in Becca's Bookoplathon next year. What I will probably definitely do is I will do the roll as you go, which will limit my reading and probably make it a lot easier on me in terms of when I play it. But yeah, I did read still a total of 9 books, and let's get into them. So the first book that I read in the month of September was Olympus Volume 2 by Rachel Smythe. This is the second book in her webcomic series turned into a full graphic novel list. This is a Persephone and Hades retelling told in sort of a modern day contemporary style setting. And like Olympus Volume 1, I ended up giving this book 5 stars. I gave it a 10 for characters, a 9 for atmosphere, a 9 for writing, 8 for plot, 9 for intrigue, 9 for logic, and 9 for enjoyment, giving it a 9.0 out of 10, which is a 5 stars. I ended up really enjoying this book and coincide with the first one. I read the first one back in May for Becca's 48-hour round of Bookoplathon, and I absolutely loved it. Still, again, I mean, I am a big fan of Greek mythology, and definitely in this book, Hades is sort of portrayed as a misunderstood, definitely styled businessman. And while in terms of you, when you think about it, their relationship is sort of really long and can be seen as kind of a little bit disgusting, as there's definitely an age gap. I personally really don't care, and I'm more into the lines of how do the characters themselves interact with each other. And I do think when you really think about it, they're really good for each other. It's sort of like a Grumpy Sunshine romance, which I absolutely love. I did give it an 8 for plot. There wasn't as much action in this one compared to the first one, where we were just like getting used to it. And I'm not entirely certain if in the original Hades and Persephone retelling, if there's a whole lot of action. I'm not particularly certain. But there was some actiony bits in this book, especially when we got towards the end, that I really did enjoy. And of course, like with the first one, the writing style and the beautiful illustrations and artwork are gorgeous. I love the use of blue undertones for Hades and the pink for Persephone. The colors do work really well together in the span of the story, and yeah, I'm very much looking forward to continuing in Volume 3. The second book that I read in the month of September was Ravensong by TJ Klune. This is the second book in his Green Creek series. While this is the indie self-pub version, this 4-book quartet is actually being traditionally published, and I can't wait to get my hands on the traditionally published version, as I'm going to tab the hell out of it. And I may do a whole separate, fully spoiler reading vlog for you guys when I get my hands on the published 4 books. So, again, call Pio rating, 10 for characters, 10 for atmosphere, 10 for writing, 9 for plot, intrigue, logic, and a 10 for enjoyment, giving it a 9.57 out of 10, which is a 5 stars. TJ Klune, you all know, is my favorite author by now. I absolutely love him. His Green Creek series, I think it's not better than some of his others, but it really hits hard with me. Werewolves were set in the Pacific Northwest, and it's rainy and cold. I mean, there's multiple LGBTQ plus male-male relationships in this series, and this one's no exception. Absolutely love 10 out of 10. The atmosphere, again, 10 out of 10. Full. It's set in the Pacific Northwest, which is fall. This is a particularly good book series if you're looking for one that's paranormal romance that reminds you of Twilight, but is not the angsty and bad writing style as Twilight is. This is definitely angsty, but the writing style in this is, again, so much better. There are a whole ton of different quotes about leading your life. I'm very looking forward to continuing. I think I know where it's going to go, which I'm entirely very happy about. But still, I could end up being really surprised. And you will definitely see me continuing with TJ Klune's quartet. The third book that I read in the month of September, another book by TJ Klune, and that is Lightning Struck Heart. So this is his first book in the Tales of Verania series. I absolutely knew and was particularly certain that this is definitely going to be a 5-star prediction when I read it. Absolutely, this book blew it out of the water. I absolutely love this book. The second book is on my TBR for the month of November, so you will see me review that book very, very soon. So let's get into my rating for this book. 10 for characters, 9 for atmosphere, 10 for writing, 9 for plot, intrigue, logic, and a 10 for enjoyment, giving it a 9.43 out of 10, which you all know is a 5-star. Absolutely loved this book. Notably, the writing style in this book is amazing. This is definitely an adult book for any of you guys who are wanting to get into TJ Klune book. This and Green Creek are entirely adult, as there are a ton of inappropriate and sexual jokes in this book, which wholeheartedly adds to the experience of its own. I mean, the main character, his name is Sam, which y'all know, 10 out of 10, absolutely love. This is definitely male. The only thing that did get it for me is sort of the atmospheric setting. I did really like the medieval sort of setting in this book. But what kind of draw it down for me to not get a 10 is, while I did read this in September, I read this when it was particularly very hot out, and I should have waited to read this when it was much colder. is I would have probably rated the atmosphere a lot higher, because I do like medieval and medieval fantasy books. For me, they're more typically of the fall reads, as here in Michigan, when it gets that cold, we tend to go to Renaissance festivals. And the atmosphere at a Renaissance festival is particularly the atmosphere in this book. The fourth book that I read in the month of September was Solitaire by Oseman. This book, I read this book because I actually read this book back in 2019 for the first time, and I actually really enjoyed it. I did read this the first time before I read anything else that mentioned Nick and Charlie, which you'll see later. I'm curious to mention them. I actually read this first, and now thinking about it, probably shouldn't have, as this book series takes place after the events of Heartstopper Volume 4, and I noticed that when I was reading the book, which entirely made it a whole lot better, because if in Heartstopper Volume 4, if it were to go and mention the events that happened in this book, would entirely probably change my rating on this book. But I'm not entirely certain. It could go either way. Essentially in this book, we follow Charlie's older sister, Tori Spring. Tori stumbles upon Solitaire at her school. They sort of lead her in. It's sort of like a cult/group organization. Y'all know the whole drill, where a group of people are trying to overthrow the government. In this case, something big happens, and it's entirely all in line with Tori Spring, and she ends up meeting a student named Michael Holden, and the two sort of try to solve the mystery of what Solitaire actually is. Very essentially, this book, for Alice Oseman's writing style, it's very quick, and I'm happy for it. Didn't take me very long to read. Again, it was a reread, and I have read Radio Silence by Alice Oseman as well, which I will reread. This book, I ended up giving it a 10 for characters, an 8 for atmosphere, 9 for writing, 9 for plot, 9 for intrigue, 8 for logic, and a 9 for enjoyment, giving it an 8.86 out of 10, which is a 4-star, very high 4-star. It is one of the highest 4 stars that I've seen in quite a bit of time. I would have given it 5 stars had it for the fact that while this book is mainly set at school, it's mainly set in your traditional school. It's not set in like Hogwarts, where it's like a fantasy school. This is more your typical high school. And for mainly to take place there, it kind of drug the atmosphere down, as I like school setting books. Don't get me wrong, I love a good school setting book. But this book is set in like your traditional high school sense, and not that I didn't have a good time in high school, I really just don't like that setting. I am more of a traditional fantasy style reader, but I do like your average contemporary novel, which this definitely is. As unlike Heartstopper, where the verb is, this is a love story, the blurb for this one is, this is not a love story. But if you were to really dig into it, it sort of, I think, may turn in to a love story, and you could totally think that it will in the future. But the only real thing that had the significant impact for me was I did give the characters 10 out of 10, as both Nick and Charlie are mentioned in this book. They are still in here together as a couple, and y'all know Nick and Charlie is one of my favorite relationships. I love them together, and for them to even be like somewhat side characters in this book, 10 out of 10 at least for characters. I tried when rating this book to rate it like I would have when I first read it back in 2019 and I didn't have my book channel then. I didn't do a whole lot of reading. I sort of just, like, read for, like, not fun, I just sort of read very slowly. But to do a reread and read it a whole lot quicker, I tried to rate it how I would have then. But the only reason why I was able to rate the characters so high is I already had known about Nick and Charlie. And I absolutely loved them together still in this book, even the first time I read it. So, very much will be continuing more with Ellis Osen's work. I have Radio Silence left to reread. I was born for this to read Loveless. And then there are 2 other novellas, which I have to get and read. One of them is Nick and Charlie. Absolutely probably will adore that book. And then This Winter, which is the novella with this one. Absolutely cannot wait. The next book and 5th book that I read in the month of September was Amari and the Great Game by B.B. Alston. This is the 2nd book in his Supernatural Investigations, I think, trilogy. It's going to be at this point. No surprise to probably people. When I read Amari and the Great Game, I absolutely loved it. This book is actually entirely no exceptions. I gave it a 10 for characters, a 10 for atmosphere, 10 for writing, 9 for plot, intrigue, logic, and a 10 for enjoyment, giving it a 9.57 out of 10, which is a 5-star. Did it the same as Ravensong. I absolutely love this book. Again, I actually think I love this book more than I loved Amari and the Great Game. And I think the reason for that is there are trials in this book. And one of the absolute things that I love in books is a good book with trials. And this book had it. And the idea of a POC main character having to go through everything that she does with trying to fit in, trying to learn people, essentially in this book with her being a magician, how much she's looked down upon and how much they absolutely hate and despise magicians and how Amari has to overcome that and she makes friends along the way. I just love the idea. Again, this was a 5-star prediction because Amari and the Knight Brothers got 5 stars. This book, of course, was a 5-star prediction and probably knew it was going to get 5 stars from me as well. I'm very glad that I actually have it, and I'm actually very glad that I read it sort of when it came out, as I think if I would have to wait and read it later, I definitely think my rating may have gone down, or I may have flown through it at that point. The writing style, again, it is a middle grade, and middle grades for me are very easy to read, especially when they're about trials. I think one of the days when I read this book, I read it in probably like 100 pages in like one day. And I even work like full-time job, and I think I read like 75 of those pages at work. Amari and the Great Game, definitely loved it. If you are a big fan of middle grade books, this is one of the best middle grade book series after. And I think you guys should really check it out if you haven't done so already. I am very much looking forward to the 3rd book, which it hasn't been announced yet. I think it's going to come out in 2024, but I'm not certain. But you all know I will definitely be continuing with this series. And then finally, the last 4 books that I read in the month of September, I did a reread. These are the only books that didn't actually make it onto my Bookoplathon TBR. Towards the end of the month, I wasn't really feeling my mentally best, and I decided, you know what? I'll draw out of my prompt jar for Bookoplathon, and I drew Vulpix, which is to read a cute book. And what I had chosen in there the first time was to read the entirety of the Heartstopper graphic novels. And I was like, yeah, fine, we'll reread them. So that's exactly what I did. I reread Heartstopper Volume 1, Heartstopper Volume 2, Heartstopper Volume 3, and Heartstopper Volume 4. I'm not going to go into my call pile ratings of this. You all know this is 5 stars. This is a reread. And I actually read all of Heartstopper again in April. Like, I have read all 4 of these Heartstopper volumes in earlier this year. I'm not going to tell you my call pile rating. You all know this is a 5-star series for me. I absolutely love Nick and Charlie. No exceptions. I do know I'm not the target audience for it, but it's LGBT. Nick and Charlie are cute AF together. They are adorable. I know that this series is a comfort book series for me. In terms of reading, I will read it when I'm not feeling my mentally best, and it'll make me feel better. And soon we will have Heartstopper 5, which I'm not excited to read. I'm very excited to read that book, but I'm not excited to read that book as while I did read all 4 of these, I'm not really looking forward to Heartstopper Volume 5, because it's probably going to probably destroy me. But then again, you'll find out in the morning. It is one of my most anticipated releases. I love Heartstopper. So, this is all the books that I read in the month of September. I did a fairly good job in the month of September. I did pull more books for Bookoplathon, but as I say, I wasn't really feeling my best towards the end of September, and I didn't want to force myself to read what I didn't want to. So I just decided to read what I wanted to, and those were Heartstopper. Again, if I hadn't had read Heartstopper, it would have been still an average reading one for me with 5 books. That's pretty good for a month, but it ended up being 9 books. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Down below in the description box, you'll find links to my social media if you want to follow me on there. Comment down below what you guys ended up reading in the month of September. I know this video is going out a little bit late, but I think it's totally fine. I mean, I ended up still filming this video anyways. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it. Subscribe for more bookish content from me. And remember, we are the one within the all.